Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, members of the public. Welcome to tonight's meeting. Just going to hand you over to Kate, my vicar, who's going to give us some words of wisdom and bless this meeting. Kate, over to you.
So an unexpected pleasure, but it gives me a chance to continue our brief whistle-stop tour through the book of James, a book of real practical wisdom for every tradition. And in the second chapter of James, he talks about different meetings and how we treat one another and how we judge between different people's claims. But he summarises it by saying, "You do well if you really fulfil the royal law according to the scripture. You shall love your neighbour as yourself." So in this meeting of robust discussion and difficult decisions, I do encourage you to love your neighbour, your councillor neighbour, your borough neighbour, and pray that God will give you wisdom. So let us pray. God of love, bless these your servants as they seek to serve the people of this borough this evening. Grant them wisdom, kindness and love in all they do. Amen.
Amen. Okay, please be seated. Thank you. Okay, I'll just go through the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once outside the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Please exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of the staff. Please make sure that all your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. And now moving on to apologies. Have we received any apologies?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, no apologies. Declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest, is there any declarations of interest apart from what's wrote down? Okay then, so now we're moving straight on to public participation. So we're going to go on to questions now. Dave, are you at the ready? Can you invite the first person, Miss Pauline Wildig, to ask her a question, please?
Can the leader of the council please explain why a group of travellers were recently given permission to park on public land in Nuneaton rather than their parking on land in Coventry, as I expect that Coventry City Council also have legal obligations to accommodate travellers who are using public facilities in their area?
Dave, is that mic okay? Because I couldn't hardly hear that, but it's okay. I got the gist of your question anyway. Can I move that to? I understand that Councillor Longden is going to answer that question.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wildig, for the question. The simple answers to the question is that when travellers arrive in a local authority area, it is the responsibility of that local authority to deal with the incursion. That's true of here and every local authority in the country. In this particular instance, there is a medical situation with a child who is very ill, and you have to take into account that, and also you have to take into account the welfare of the family group. When the council goes to court, they are asked those questions, and you have to say that you've dealt with those issues before you can take the legal course of action that you want to take. So all that's being done all the time. This was exacerbated by the fact of this very ill child, and because a message was received in these offices very late on the Monday evening, and a decision was made because of what was said about them putting 100 caravans on the roads of Nuneaton the following day if they didn't get permission to stay. Now, I think that was the wrong decision to let them stay. I was not able to be involved in that decision, but I can understand why it was made. It was probably the wrong decision for the right reasons. You didn't want the chaos that would have ensued. On the Wednesday of that week as well, in front of one of the council officers, because they wanted to bring 15 caravans here and we said no, only 12, they then said there would be 300 caravans on the roads of Nuneaton if we didn't comply. Now, I said, OK, we're not going to go any further with this. Let them bring 300 if they wish. In fact, it didn't materialise, but had it materialised, it would have been a matter for the police to actually deal with in those circumstances, and those responsible would have been accountable in law for obstructing the highway. So, as it happened then, the agreement that was reached to allow them to stay was breached, very quickly in fact, and that agreement was then withdrawn. We asked the police to exercise their powers under section 62 of the Egyptian Travellers Act, and they refused. They said as far as they were concerned it was still a tolerated encampment. So we had to go through the normal procedures of using our section 77 provisions under the law and issued notices to quit the land, which they always ignore, and we got a court date for last Thursday. And the court gave a ruling that we got the ground back. There could be no action taken on the Friday because we couldn't get the bailiffs involved. The bailiffs would have needed police protection as well, and the police keep quoting lack of resources to do this, and they need time to get the resources in place. So they were given until this morning to move. It was anticipated by myself and the officers that would actually move over the weekend, which they did. That's been a pattern all the way through for the past 3 months. And they moved on Saturday onto the Pingles. Notice was again served today, and we are waiting for a further court date this week, hopefully. Well, we normally get them within days. A further court date to actually move them again. Hopefully we will be supported by the police. But I can tell you, I found out as late as 3:30 this afternoon that the police confirm that the emergency stopping place, which is at Hartshill, is not suitable given the numbers of caravans, and they will not be using their Section 62 powers for this encampment. The family have refused to reduce the number of caravans to meet the ESP capacity of 10. So it looks like the police are supporting that argument, and they may consider using their Section 61 powers, but at the moment this is not even being considered. And that's been the case throughout the whole period over the past 3 months. And we are left in the middle all the time. So that's as best I can in the time allowed to me.
Is that it? Okay, thank you, Councillor Longden. Moving on to my second question, I'd like to invite Mr. Arthur Kelly to ask his question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Repeated time lost in school closures, business losses, cost to evict them repeatedly, and the repeating cost of clean-up of human waste and rubbish paid for by residents of Nuneaton Borough through council tax. Shouldn't the travellers pay for that?
Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simple answer to that is yes. But saying yes, it then becomes, you then have to first, you have to identify the people who are actually doing it. It's no good just saying them. You have to identify individuals. The police have the same thing in the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. They have to find the individuals, identify them and charge them. We have to do the same thing if we want to take them into court, and we have to get their names and addresses. And when you've got them into court, if you get a court ruling, if you get a fine or whatever, you've then got to collect it. And by the time you've gone round to collect it, they've gone. So yes, I agree with it's not a simple thing to just go and prosecute somebody and get them to pay for it.
So it's easier to take it off me.
Please listen to what's being said. I understand it's frustrating, but this is what's happening. Is that it, Councillor Longden? Yeah. Okay. Can I go on to my next one? So I'd like to invite Mr. Brian Walmsley to make his statement, please.
Thank you. Regarding gypsy and traveller incursions, do these local Conservative councillors need to be reminded of their comment? Illegal gypsy and traveller incursions has blighted this council and its residents for many years. Does that not just apply to Nuneaton and Bedworth? Do they not watch the news? As a very recent BBC Midlands report cited traveller encampments as being a never-ending game of cat and mouse, from Bilston to Bulkington, Warwick to Wolverhampton. So quite clearly, it is not just Nuneaton. It's not just the Midlands. This is a national issue. Just in case the Conservative councillors should actually wish to educate themselves for once, I include the web link. Let me firstly deal with the Conservative councillors' reference to target hardening vulnerable sites within our borough. Have these Conservative councillors not seen the photographs of 6-foot metal fences being ripped down? One would have expected a 6-foot metal fence to be a hard target to overcome, although I guess not. Let's not even mention Conservative government police cuts at this point. However, I must say I'm extremely pleased to see the large concrete blocks that have already been positioned at various locations throughout our borough, and I would like to thank NBBC for this effort, work which was already in progress prior to this current Conservative motion. Returning to injunctions, why on Wednesday the 12th of September did every Conservative councillor vote against a motion that included NBBC applying for an injunction, but now they call for the same thing they voted against? You could not make it up. After that meeting...
Hold on a minute. Can I ask members of the public, please respect this chamber, please?
After that meeting, I saw a social media post by one or other of these Conservative councillors claiming their party all voted against that particular motion because it appeared to be a congratulatory message to NBBC council officers. How absolutely petty and pathetic of them. When Warwickshire Police say NBBC are doing a good job, and I quote Superintendent Mike Smith, Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council have a good record for progressing evictions very quickly within the legislation. Did the Conservative councillors hear that part? Within the legislation. It is clearly the legislation that needs to change. Legislation and law is a responsibility of government. When will MJMP listen to the people of Nuneaton and do something that benefits us? It would appear that the Irish government listened to their people and have already introduced a change in their law. There's a petition to the UK government to make entering and occupying land without consent a criminal offence. I do hope these Conservative councillors have signed it. It refers to a change from civil law into criminal law, which is categorically a responsibility of government. In conclusion, I would suggest these Conservative councillors should actually be looking at the root cause of the issue and should be calling for an extraordinary meeting with their precious Marcus Jones to tell him that, for once, MJMP needs to step up to the plate, to stop talking and start doing.
Thank you, Mr. Walmsley. Councillor Longden, do you wish to reply? No. Okay. So I'd like to invite Mr. Colemeyer to ask his question, please.
Thank you very much. This is to the portfolio holder for planning and development. With Hawkesbury being put into the plan at such a late stage, could the portfolio holder inform me of the timescale he thinks at which the plan will be reviewed regards housing numbers when the plan is eventually adopted? Will it be days, months or years?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Phillips, would you like to reply?
The timescale of the plan, as far as we are aware of it at the present moment in time, is that the consultation on the main modifications will end on the 7th of November, following which the representations will be referenced in line with the inspector's recommendations as soon as practical before being forwarded to the inspector. The timescale for what happens then is in the hands of the inspector, and it will be his decision as to whether or not further hearings are required. The next stage would be for the inspector to issue his report to the council, which will then be reported to Cabinet and to full council before the local plan can be adopted. Government legislation and guidance states local plans should be reviewed every 5 years, and so it is likely that a review of the evidence base would be at the first stage of this and would commence after the plan is adopted. Perhaps at that stage the party and councillors opposite will review the nothing to do with us policy and fully engage with the future housing needs and numbers of this borough. Mr. Mayor, even our MP, I hear, wants the plan adopted. Not paused, at a recent Transforming Nuneaton meeting with consultants, business and health leaders want the plan adopted. If and when the plan is adopted, there will supplementary planning documents that will need to be produced. One of these will affect the town centre, because the local plan sits at the top and all the supplementary planning documents sit underneath that. I do not see it being 5 years to the next review of the numbers, as no other district will, I hope, not want to review. Unless the government turn round and say there is no duty to cooperate, then it would be best to work with it across the housing area in reviewing its numbers and instructed, based on the new framework that comes in 2018-19. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I would like to invite Mrs. Isabel Jakes to ask her question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me? Lovely. Right, I'm Isabel Jakes from Ash Green, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of many residents throughout the borough. I was in Hawkesbury during the first consultation, at which were present several officers of the council who appeared out of their depth and unable to provide clear or detailed information on the borough plan, and in this instance, Hawkesbury. Why were no Labour councils present? That's as far as I know. If this is your plan and you are confident in it, then surely you should be there to answer the questions and listen to any residents' concerns. Are we to take your absence as a failing to care about the residents of Hawkesbury, or the fact that your plan is unsound and therefore you are unable to face the residents, as you know you are unable to defend your own position on the borough plan? Why were no Labour councillors there supporting the officers and, more importantly, their residents? I ask this in good faith on behalf of residents from all over the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Jakes. Councillor Phillips, would you like to reply?
Present moment in time, I see nothing to suggest the plan is not sound. We've had nothing back from the inspector, apart from the main modifications to the plan that need addressing. Since May, Mr Mayor, I've attempted to keep the facts of the planning process under the National Planning Policy Framework, but despite this, some residents, still believe it is politically driven by the Labour group. Nothing could be further from the truth. But even if I said in the echo chamber of Facebook and Twitter, it makes no difference, so we just have to live with that. The events at Hawkesbury were attended by officers of the policy team, and at any one time there were 3 officers present. One of the reasons for the events was to inform residents about the local plan process and how to engage in the main modifications, Mr Mayor, which is best placed for officers to do and what had been requested by them at Cabinet. Mr Mayor, these were not political meetings. Although any councillor was free to attend, as were members of the public.
I would like to invite Lubbs to ask his question, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The consultation on Hawkesbury and the main modifications is now well underway. The turnout by residents to the first public consultation was extremely low. As I write, the second consultation event being held at Hawkesbury hasn't happened. It has now, and I'll tell you now, there were 5 people in 3 hours because I stood there from 10 till 1. Residents across the borough, including Hawkesbury, have vented frustration with how difficult the representation forms are to complete. Other councils have conducted similar exercises, and the forms have been much clearer and easier for members of the public to complete. Many have asked why the Borough Council are not holding sessions on how to complete these forms. Instead, it has fallen to local residents groups and MPs to explain the process in a series of community-based meetings. If we are to have a full and open consultation, then this council needs to fully engage and support people. I've seen on the council's Facebook page an attempt to engage, and I have read the comments. Most of the people who have commented feel disconnected with the plan, and if I quote one of them, it says, "It is your plan, not our plan." I'd once again urge the council to review the plan as soon as it has been submitted under the MPPF 2018, which would allow for a reduction in numbers and would make the majority of residents much happier. You keep saying it is down to the inspector. He has said on several occasions it is your plan. So how about taking ownership and making decisions which resonate with the residents and not within Coventry or Warwickshire or even the inspector? I would like to ask the portfolio holder for full and comprehensive breakdown of how they have proactively advertised these consultation events, and are there any further ways, even at this stage, that they could reach out to the local communities on improving the consultation process? Thank you.
Thank you, Lubbs. Councillor Phillips, would you like to reply?
So sometimes we do get a play on words when it says other councils have conducted similar exercises and the forms have been much clearer and easier for the public to complete. Similar is not this. Other councils, how many? You know, we can all stand there and say these things, but examples. Thank you. Thank you. Even better. Contrary to the question, officers of the planning policy team who attended the consultation drop-in session felt it was well attended, with around 60 people coming to the event. The Hawkesbury Village Residents Association also commented on the fact that the event was well attended on their Facebook page. There were just over 750 letters sent out to the residents informing them of the event. The first session ran from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock and was attended by at least 3 members of the planning policy team at any one time. There was a period of about 10 minutes around 7:15 when there were no members of the public. However, at all other times there were members of the public in attendance. Questions were asked of the officers who were there, including guidance on how to complete the forms, which were available at the drop-in session as well as the guidance notes. The event on Saturday ran from 10 till 4 with, disappointingly, I must admit, 25 people attending, even though 750 people have had letters. The representation forms to be completed are based on model forms from the Planning Inspectorate and include clear guidance on how to fill them in. Planning policy officers are available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday in person at the Town Hall, as well as via phone and email, in order to help anyone with filling in the representation forms should they have any questions. The team have dealt with very few queries about completing the forms so far. As mentioned, all the residents of Hawkesbury between the level crossing on Black Horse Road and the canal, which again totals around 750 properties, were sent letters informing them of the consultation and of the drop-in sessions. Many of the people attending the events mentioned that they had received a letter. Alongside this, the head of planning visited the chair and treasurer of the Hawkesbury Village Residents Association prior to the consultation on the 10th of September to explain the process, to agree where and when the drop-in sessions would occur, how they were to be advertised, and to deliver paper copies of the representation forms. The council has also issued several press releases to the local newspaper in order to inform as many people as possible, as well as using social media to advertise the event. Apart from the consultation in Hawkesbury, Mr Mayor, all those that are on the council's local plan database, together with all those people who have commented on the publication version of the plan, whether or not they took part in the hearings, has also been informed by letter or email of the consultation. This is over 3,000. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Moving on with business. Notice of motion. This is an extraordinary meeting of the Council, which has been called following a request from the pursuant to paragraph 3.1 of the Council Procedure Rules. There are 3 separate motions which I propose to deal with in turn. Can I ask Councillor Wilson, as first signatory to the requisition, to move the first motion?
On Hawkesbury Village first, I believe that's the first one. Mr Mayor, given the concession by Cabinet to actually hold consultation events as part of their decision to put Hawkesbury into the borough plan as a developing site for housing, on paper this motion is not necessary. Indeed, we considered withdrawing the motion. However, there is a very important reason why this motion is necessary, especially for the residents of Hawkesbury. Regardless of what we may think about the other sites in the borough plan, at least they have, mainly through Conservative questions and motions over the years, been debated in this chamber, and residents have had the opportunity to put their views to full council. Hawkesbury deserves to have its voice heard in this chamber too. Tonight we will hear from the controlling group that it's everyone else's fault but theirs. The county council, the government. They'd blame the tooth fairy if they could get away with it. Anyone to avoid taking responsibility for their own actions. But let us lay a few facts on the table, facts which I imagine will be extremely uncomfortable for members opposite and momentum in the gallery. The County Council has conducted a technical assessment of the traffic. That's their job. They are required to do so by law and on strictly legal and professional grounds. Elected members, quite rightly, do not decide whether a traffic scheme is viable or not. The County Council has not expressed its support for Hawkesbury, or indeed any other site to be developed. That is not their function. Their job is to be consulted only. It is their job to advise whether a scheme is possible. Nuneaton and Bedworth, this council, is the planning authority. We, and we alone, decide what land we decide to allocate for housing based on evidence. And finally, the Labour Cabinet had a choice. They decided to allocate Hawkesbury for development. No one else made that decision for them. All 5 members of the Cabinet voted for Hawkesbury, and they had other choices in front of them. We will hear much from Labour saying it's not their fault and they had no choice. As the facts I mentioned illustrate, they clearly did. If they did not, then residents of this borough could be forgiving for wondering, what is the point of this council if we don't make our own decisions? It was a very interesting experience being sat in the Cabinet meeting when Hawkesbury was being considered. Given that all the members of the sat around the Cabinet table had in some way, shape or form railroaded the borough plan through to its current stage, it was very difficult to reconcile that with the image being presented of sympathy or indeed remorse for the decision they were about to take. Indeed, one member said that he has family there, so he knows the difficulties that residents in Hawkesbury will face every day with the traffic. So to assuage Cabinet members' guilt, they finally, for once, did the right thing. Following pressure from residents and opposition members, they agreed to facilitate consultation events in Hawkesbury. They also agreed to write personally to many of the residents affected to advise them that their community was now at risk. However, residents across Nuneaton and Bedworth are rightly asking, where was the sympathy for the residents of Weddington and St Nicholas with the 5,000 houses being dumped there? It is because a councillor doesn't have relatives there? Where were the personal letters to all of the residents of Whitestone and Bulkington when they were added at the last minute to the previous round of consultation? Where was the apology to the residents of the Woodlands when Labour pledged one thing to get elected and then did completely the opposite at the town hall? Many residents detect a hint of double standards from the controlling Labour group, yet they will maintain their line that it is the fault of everyone else. The truth is, Hawkesbury deserves better, but then so does the rest of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Clearly this Labour Council just cannot deliver what residents deserve. I would urge members to consider tonight and actually support, in principle, voting for the motion, because they already passed it at Cabinet, so there's no difference. This is purely to enable members to debate something which everywhere else has had debated, but the residents of Hawkesbury deserve their opportunity to have our say, to have their say and listen to us too. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Well, sir. Is there a seconder for the
motion proposed by Councillor Wilson and reserve my right to speak?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Panda.
Mr Mayor, I can't understand why the controller group of the borough unsympathetic to the residents of Hawkesbury. The village has grown massively in recent years, and further growth without adequate infrastructure is irresponsible and dangerous. There is no school or doctor's surgery in the village. Primary and secondary schools too far to realistically walk to, and the school run is reliant on travelling by car. Do Labour think that doubling the size of the village will help matters? We need education and health facilities in the village rather sending children too far away schools on already congested roads. Having a marina and cycle route is nice, but having a doctor's surgery and primary school would matter far more to the residents. Hawkesbury village is in practical an island, isolated from the rest of the borough, separated by a level crossing on one side and a canal on the other side, joined to the outside world by a weak and narrow bridge, and on the other side a level crossing with significant downtime. Large vehicle cannot get over to the bridge, and the school route and the railway crossing can be down for as much as a few hours at the extreme worst. There is already new development going in Coventry on the other side of the Canal Bridge, which will be adding more traffic towards Black Horse Road. Instead of flooding Hawkesbury with houses, this council needs to tell Coventry to take its own overspill and stop picking on our own people. Nuneaton and Bedworth is the planning authority and has the power to choose sites for development. There is no need for 15,555 houses in Nuneaton and Bedworth, and therefore no need to add Hawkesbury Golf Club into the borough plan. The government inspector gave 3 options, and it was the cabinet decision to go with the third option to include Hawkesbury in the plan, but the official preference was option 2, to only use this site for building in the full housing targets fall short. This would protect to the site because we all know 30,000 people will not move to the Nuneaton place. I want to know what or who changed the officers beyond this. We have only had 2 very poorly advertised consultations, which on no Labour council attended. I suggest a full public hearing is needed before we add Hawkesbury into the borough plan. If you cannot give us our schools or give our doctors, then you should keep Hawkesbury in the green belt. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'll speak to the motion, because I've had 2 speakers there and I haven't jumped up and said, speak to the motion and what's written down here, and that's about the consultations. And I'm going to make an amendment, Mr. Mayor. Right? Obviously, we're going to disagree. Got to make an amendment. Because I can't agree with this council expresses its concern at another example of this council's failure to provide a carefully considered and sustainable borough plan. Well, obviously, I wouldn't do it. There's no fact behind that statement. No examples behind that statement. And the other thing I would disagree with, where it says here, and resolves to learn from the mistakes of previous consultations. I do believe we were not awarded, but commended on our previous consultations at the start of the borough plan. Well, it might be minimum standards, but it's a play on words again, isn't it? So what I propose to do...
Can I ask members said, please?
Right, all the words up to and including the borough plan, because obviously we don't accept that. Except, following the recent findings of the inspector regarding the site at Hawkesbury, this council believes that residents should be fully consulted about this proposed change to the borough plan. Accept that, leave it in. Remove and resolve to learn from the mistakes of the previous consultations. Remove and add, this council note the extension of the length of the consultation from the statutory 6 weeks to 8 weeks, and that accordingly 2 consultation events were held. One on Wednesday the 26th of September from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and one on Saturday the 6th of October from 10 to 4. And remove the word are and replace it with and staffed by officers of the planning policy team who can answer these issues from the residents of Hawkesbury. And Mr. Mayor also add, and I'm sure they would agree with us here, this council continues to encourage residents to make their views known during the extended consultation period on the main modifications. That's just brought things up to date, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's a fair option, because Councillor Wilson was actually feeling that could withdraw their motion earlier.
Thank you, please.
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Sorry, Councillor Concord.
Point of order, we cannot understand.
Okay, copies are coming round now. No. She's just going to photocopy some, then she's doing it.
It's the big one, isn't it? But where yours was on.
Okay, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, can you return to your seats, please? Okay, so we've had the amendment, we've had a seconder, so now it's open to debate on the amendment. I've got Councillor Tromans. Would you like to speak?
I'm looking at the amendment that's been made here. I'd like to support friendly amendments if we ever get a truly friendly one, but there's a couple of things in here that I think it would be a shame to miss out, and they were put in for good reason. And they were referred to by the councillor when he introduced his amendment. Council expresses concern in another example of the council's failure to provide carefully considered and sustainable borough plan. Wants to take that out because there's no evidence. Well, I would say there probably is a lot of evidence that it has been considered, the borough plan, by the controlling Labour group. But I can say that there's very little evidence that residents' concerns were ever considered. And I think we can give you very clear evidence of that. When I was first elected, not very long ago, in 2014, there was 3 of us. And now there's 16 of us. And at the last election, a majority of people in Nuneaton and Bedworth voted for Conservative because...
All right, can I ask members of the public to please be quiet?
Yeah, former councillors should know. There is evidence, overwhelming evidence, and the evidence that matters, the evidence of the residents of this borough. And time again, they have said that they feel the borough plan is unfair. And I've just given you the empirical evidence, which is that they voted overwhelmingly against it. The other thing that you're asking to remove in here relates to consultation. And I think although I could scarcely believe my ears, you said we've won an award for our borough a plan consultation. Well, I can maybe think that people would want to give us some kind of award, but not a nice one. Putting it politely, maybe some kind of booby prize. And just to remind everybody, again, you'll hear this a lot because there's a lot about planning tonight and one way and another. The whole, as Councillor Wilson said at the start of this, the whole, it's someone else's fault. It's the government that forces on it. It's this, it's the county, it's whatever. It's not. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council are the planning authority. This motion recognises the failures of the controlling group as the planning authority, not to consult properly, not to bring forward a borough plan that residents could support. And so, no, I think you do need to learn the lessons of that, as it was said by your own consultation.
Councillor Glass.
I actually twisted my ankle at last week and I'm having a wee bit difficulty standing on it. But let me say straight away, for those in the gallery who think this motion is about Hawkesbury, it's not. It's about the Tories and their sidekicks, the Greens. They're not bothered about the government inspector's views or the county council's late decision to side with the developers, without any public consultation, of course. As you see from the motion tonight, all these things, the consultations have been done. Do you notice they have not requested that the Tory County Council Highways to be part of that recommendation? Those interested, look in YouTube statements to see who was the first to ask the borough for county highway officers to attend. At least you'll find out the person who asked it, rather than relying on the rubbish included in the In Touch newspaper. I assume this is a propaganda sheet the Tories wish to get rid of. I am, of course, talking about their own publication. I also noticed that the North Warwickshire MP is on the sheet as well. This is the same guy, as far as I know, who's never been in touch with North Warwickshire Council to get them to reduce housing across his constituency. You may ask why. Perhaps it's because it's a Tory council. If there's anything to come out of this meeting tonight, it will be this. I understand that the MP will be in Hawkesbury to listen to concerns. Could somebody pass on my question? Why was the local county councillors not informed about their highway changes? Also, why did he keep voting to increase housing figures at a national level? Lastly, Mr Mayor, all this regarding Hawkesbury could have been settled a long time ago. As a reply from Councillor Ian Lloyd from the developer's representative, question, if the county highways had not changed their minds, would you be sitting in front of us now? The answer is no. This speaks volumes as far as Hawkesbury is concerned. This is not a conspiracy theory, but a lazy, inept Tory county councils and the two-faced Tory MP for not doing their jobs. I hope the residents will ask the MP why he and his county councillors let the good folk of Hawkesbury down. Lastly, I ask the government inspector to listen to the people and their great concerns. Saying that, rather than wasting people's time tonight because of all this nonsensical politics, I ask the council to move to the vote.
Right, so is there a seconder to move to the vote? Okay, Councillor Pomfrey.
My recollection of the Constitution is that you only move to a vote if there has been adequate debate. The whole point about leaving this on the agenda was to enable debate. If anyone thinks what we've had tonight is debate, they are seriously deluded.
Councillor Concourt, is it a point of order?
I've been able to move to a vote before I have a right to reply.
Right, I have got a list of speakers, so we're going to have a few more before we go to the vote. Next on my list is Councillor Evans.
The Labour amendment seeks to basically take out the first sentence of this motion. this council expresses its concerns at another example of this council's failure to provide a carefully considered and sustainable borough plan. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think that our borough plan was carefully considered. What about the woodlands? Was that carefully considered? It floods every single year. Roads are blocked off. Houses on Dove Close, they're starting to flood every year. Was that carefully considered? And I'd also make the point about the roads. Was that carefully considered when you tried to adopt the plans to wedge this new road through the woodlands, which is even going against your... Councillor Glasswood...
Can you talk on the amendment?
And Labour trying to wriggle themselves out because they don't like debate. They're trying to close it off because they don't want the public to know the truth. Mr Mayor, I cannot vote for this amendment. If you think that this borough plan was carefully considered, then I think you need to go away in a room and have a good think about that, because, you know, have you not asked yourselves yet why you lost control of the council in May? You know, as Councillor Tromans pointed out, how did that?
On the amendment.
Could I ask?
Just on the amendment.
There's one rule for...
Talk on the amendment.
Well, not vote for this amendment because, yet again, the Labour group are trying to wriggle themselves out of getting debate, and I think it's disgraceful. I think our residents deserve a lot better.
Evans. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks to debate on this item to expose the political game playing of the Conservative opposition. If there is a problem with the borough plan or the consultations, it is that the government has given too much strength to developers and not enough to local authorities. So similar to the traveller issue, there's a danger we're throwing stones at the wrong house. We should...
Can you just give me a minute, please, Councillor? Is it a point of order?
Mr Mayor, yeah, in line with the Constitution, as you've just said to me, members of this council have to speak within the motion. You've told me that I can't talk what I was saying about because it's about the borough plan, but you've allowed Councillor Elliott to talk about travellers. I don't understand what travellers has got...
That is not a point of order, is it? And apart from that, I'm the Mayor, so I'll be calling any councillor from whichever side to talk on the amendment. I've already said it once to talk on the amendment, Councillor Elliott, and then if I have to, I'll pull her up again, and then I will do. I don't need you to tell me how to do my job, thanks. Councillor Elliott, can you stand up again, please?
I'm speaking to the amendment, Mr Mayor. If there is a problem with the borough plan or with consultations, it's that there's too much power given to developers. So we need to be careful not to be throwing stones at the wrong people. We should be directing our opposition to our MPs, Marcus Jones, Craig Tracy and Mark Pawsey, lobbying them to give local councils more say and developers lose their presumption in favour of approval, also known as profit before people, profit before the environment, profit before common sense. Therefore, I'm happy to support the amendment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Wilson.
Well, when they start to bring out the big guns in the gallery rather than in the chamber. Mr Mayor,
Councillor Snort, please.
Mr Mayor, if members of the public want to call people on this side of the chamber pathetic, perhaps they should consider the whitewashing which the current administration is trying to do of its previous history. And I'll take no lessons from Councillor Beaumont because the residents of Bulkington spoke. Right. Now, the amendment, Mr Mayor, any acknowledgement, any sense of learning of this council's history when it comes to consultations. Now, who on earth thinks that having a consultation event on a budget night is a good exercise in consultation? Not me, but they did. Who thinks it is a good exercise in consultation to actually put a site into the borough plan and then not hold a consultation event anywhere near it at all? We don't. They do. Who thinks it's a good idea to hold consultation events when most of the people affected will be at work? Not us. They do. They've learnt none of the lessons of history about what happened, and the residents from Whitestone and Bulkington who know what I'm talking about will think that if I even attempt to vote for that amendment which they're putting forward tonight, would try and lynch me because they know I would be denying history and denying the truth. And I will not do that. Now, Hawkesbury deserves to be debated about the pros and cons of whether it goes in, whether it goes out. But instead of having that, and that's the only reason we left it on the agenda tonight, Mr Mayor, was to actually enable that debate so that those people who are actually affected can see democracy in action. This isn't democracy in action. This is a lesson in obfuscation and in smoke and mirrors because they don't want to debate what's in front of them. They just want to try and tweak it a little here and there. So they don't. Please. I am speaking on the amendment. Debate the heart and the substance of the issue. It is to try and get them off the collective hook. And that will not wash with these benches, and ultimately it won't wash with the people outside. They spoke in May, they will speak again. You clearly haven't learned what's going on in this borough, because residents deserve better.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've got Councillor Graham.
With, after this mangling of our original, very clear and reasonable amendment, is just an account of what's already happened. So this amendment has no purpose. On Hawkesbury, we got no attendance from Labour, no help from residents for them, just conspiracy theories. Labour are using the excuse that highways officers have said it's not impossible to build here. Well, I'm sure it's not impossible to eat 100 Mars bars in an hour, but I'd still advise against it. You have the power to choose to keep Hawkesbury in the green belt or choose it as a reserve site in case more than 30,000 people decide to move into the area over the next 11 years. If the Borough Council were unable to choose these options, then the inspector wouldn't have given you them. Why can't the Borough Council admit that they have made mistakes in the past with poorly ran, secretive consultation events? We all make mistakes, and if you aren't even willing to admit them and learn from them, then how can people trust Labour to run this council? 52% of the people in the borough have recently seen through this, and they want change. Who gave the council the awards for running good consultations? Was it the private eye? Did you read the article to make sure it wasn't a parody article? Are the council saying that a third-rate plan is better than a seventh-rate plan? If we don't set the bar high, then the Borough Council standards with the Borough Plan will continue to slip, and that's unacceptable. So that's why we put forward the exact wording that we did with our motion, and that's why I'll be supporting our motion and not your amendment. Thank you.
I'm going to take last speaker now, Councillor Conkle.
I liked most of the original motion. It had lots of really important stuff in it which has been deleted in this amendment. Lots of stuff about consultations, about the failures of this council in the past. And I would like to propose an amendment to the amendment because I would like to put all the words back of the original motion except for change to the in front of Borough Plan. Because I think the people of Hawkesbury should be able to discuss the proposed Borough Plan, not just the changes. Because the people in Hawkesbury need to be able to discuss the housing numbers, the employment sites, the whole plan, not just the little bits that have changed. And therefore I would propose we put all the original motion back except for the words change to there so that the people in Hawkesbury can discuss the whole Borough Plan. We have had lots of things that have changed, which is why we say Hawkesbury is going back in the plan because of new circumstances. Well, there's also a new ONS report which says there'll be 6,500 new households in the borough, not 15,000. The people of Hawkesbury should be able to respond to that in their plan. We've actually had a vote to exit the EU. The people of Hawkesbury should say that will affect the borough plan. All the things that have happened since 2014 when we started developing this plan, the people of Hawkesbury should be able to discuss. And therefore I'm proposing we actually modify the amendment to put all the words back except for change to the. Because I think the people of Hawkesbury deserve a full consultation like no one else has. And there's so much for the people of Hawkesbury to discuss. The air pollution.
Counc's got a copy of the amendment.
Yeah, I'll give you. I'll cross the word.
No, I don't need you to. I don't need you to. Have you got a copy of the amendment?
Yeah.
then that is what I want you to talk about.
I
don't want you to talk about air quality. I don't want you to talk about anything else. I want you to talk about what is wrote down in front of you.
Mr. Mayor, as I'm allowed to, stating all the original words.
The amendment.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
You have just totally changed.
Right, okay. I didn't realise I had one more speaker, Councillor Colby. And then that's it.
I've heard about profit before people, but I think we're getting politics before people at the moment. At the Cabinet meeting on the 5th of September, when we were talking about Hawkesbury and the consultation, the members of the controlling group were basically trying to push a fallacy that myself as a county councillor could have stopped the highways from removing their objections for the Hawkesbury allocation. And as a consequence, that would then stop the allocation being added into the borough plan. Well, if that's the case, which it isn't, if that's the case, then, you know, if I've got a highways magic wand, there's a lot of things I'd be waving it about, as I'm sure you know with my record with highways. Others were also asked, what did you do to stop the county council from withdrawing their objections? Well, what did the Cabinet do? What did anybody else do?
Right, talking on the amendment.
I am, yeah, I'm referring
There's
to...
nothing in here about county or Warwickshire County Council.
Well, I'm responding to Councillor Glass.
Yeah, well, I want you to talk on the amendment.
Yeah,
please.
I will do. Okay. Did you tell anybody at the consultation, the award-winning apparently consultation that we've got? Yeah, did anybody actually speak to anybody in highways or anybody in the Labour group, of the wider Labour group, to get them to wave their magic county council highways wand? Were there any county councillors at these consultations? Because you've got county councillors as well. And your leader of the Labour group at Warwick is a Bedworth Labour councillor. So where was he? If you're talking about me, where was he? What did you do about that? Did you tell him to go to the consultation? You didn't tell anybody anything because you know that you can't actually justify what you're saying, let alone do it at a consultation with residents where they are desperately trying to stop this allocation from going through because it's a one-road town. You fail to tell people at consultation or in the wider realm of the public that actually the highways, if there's nothing legally that they can object on, they cannot legally object. They don't get up on a whim and decide whether one day they're going to object to something and one day they're not. So when you consulted on that, did you make that clear? Did you make that clear that they're actually following legislation? We hear so often enough that from the group over there that it's the government's fault or it's the inspector's fault or it's Uncle Tom Cobley and all's fault, it's anybody's fault. You need to stop trying to mislead people. You need to be honest with people. They might not like what you've got to say, but at least be honest with them. And you just can't. You can't own anything, can you? It's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault, and you never, ever hold your hands up and say, sorry, really sorry about this, but we have to do this. We hear you had 3 options from the inspector, and it's all right for you to have to abide by government legislation, but God forbid the highways team should have to do that as well, because then you blame it on me, or you blame it on Bagwan, because our magic wands don't come out in time for you lot to get you to be able to make something of it. We have to stick to legislation too, as much as we don't like to sometimes. Believe me, highways legislation is the bane of my life, as you all know. So when you go to consultation to believe that you're doing, please be honest with people, because I don't honestly think that you can.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. So it's over to June for right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Golby, politics before people. That was quite a political speech you made there, wasn't it? Chair, in seconding this amendment, I too will try and speak to the notice of motion, exactly as Councillor Phillips did. Although I have to say, Mr. Mayor, I am tempted to mention Councillor Wilson's comments when he spoke about history and he spoke about apologies that have been made. Where is the apology from the Conservative group for choosing not to take part in the discussions about the local plan when the plan was drawn up some time ago? The Conservative group absolutely refused to take part.
What? I presume the councillor's referring to some formal thing. Oh, and then she's not talking to the motion, then, is she?
Councillor Tandy, can we just
I
wrap
think
up this
I
and
was
talk to about
talking
the
to
motion?
the motion because I was talking about the comments that Councillor Wilson had said. But having said that, Mr. Mayor, I have seconded this amendment because I believe the portfolio holder has given full details of the consultation events that have taken place or will take place, the attendance at those consultation meetings, and the fact that the residents group have been fully informed of the procedures. That is the reason why I have seconded and will be supporting this amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Right, I've been told that Councillor Wilson, you have a right to reply.
I believe Councillor Wilson has already spoken in this debate and therefore cannot speak for a third time.
I believe that I have spoken on the amendment, so I don't have the right to reply. If it goes back, if the amendment is approved, then I reply again if it becomes a substantive motion. But I believe on this instance, Councillor Jackson and I actually do agree on something procedural. So,
then we'll go to the vote then.
Mr. Mayor, I move a recorded vote.
We'll go to a recorded vote.
Okay, if you could indicate for or against the amendment. Okay. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brindley Edwards. Councillor Brown. He's not in the room. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Absent. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox.
4.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Also absent. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandair. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
4.
Councillor Wilson. So that's carried.
Okay. So that's one, and that becomes a substantive motion. Okay, it's open to the floor. Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reiterate and just remind people that seem to be persuading themselves and forgetting it is not the government that determined and drew up our borough plan. It is not the county council. The legal planning authority is Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. That is why these motions and the amendments have been put forward and that refer to Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. So let's be under no illusions, MPs, whatever. It's all just smoke and mirrors and detraction and trying to get people to look the other way. The fact of the matter is all of these planning issues are down to Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. The size of the number of houses that have been put into the borough plan is what you decided, not what the government did.
Councillor Conkle.
I've actually put back all the Tory words except for the words change to the, which actually we can cross out. I see a nodding from Philip saying no, which is a great pity because
Councillor Con.
Couldn't do it when it was
No,
talking about
Councillor
amendments.
Concord. Councillor Jackson.
Debate in regard to this motion this evening, this amendment that is now the substantial motion. Mr Mayor, I am quite getting frustrated because it seems that the opposition councillors repeatedly say what is wrong. They haven't come clean with the electorate and told them where they would build houses, where they would put industry, and yet every time they attack us. So a challenge to the Conservatives. What would you do? Be honest with the good people of Nuneaton and Bedworth.
I'd appreciate E says after an amendment has been carried, which is what we've just had from the Labour Party, the Mayor will read out the amended motion before putting any further amendments, or if there are none, put it to the vote. I believe that Councillor Condacor actually, whilst is proposed a different motion to the one on the initial agenda, and therefore it should actually be heard procedurally, whether we agree or not.
To the vote, and I'll second that.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Paragraph 14.14.2, so a bit further on in the procedure rules, states that a motion or amendment in similar terms to one that has been rejected at a meeting of council in the past 6 months cannot be moved unless the notice of motion or amendment is signed by at least 12 members. So it can't be done at this meeting.
Right, okay. So we're going to move to the vote again. So,
Mr Mayor, I'd like to
Simone.
move a recorded vote.
No problem. Simone.
On the substantive. So, if you could indicate for or against on the substantive motion, please.
We've got a procedural vote to take first.
Okay. This is for or against moving to the vote. Okay, Councillor Beaumont. For. Councillor Brinley Edwards. Yes. Councillor Brown, not in the room. Councillor Croft. Yes. Councillor Daffin. For. Councillor Doughty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Yes. Councillor Gazane. Absent. Councillor Glass. For. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancock.
For.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash is absent. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longden. Councillor Panday. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
For.
Councillor Wilson. That's carried.
Okay, we're now moving to the vote. Simone,
Mr
over
Mayor,
to you.
could I call for a recorded vote, please?
Yeah, no problem.
So, for or against the substantive motion, please. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brinley Edwards. Councillor Brown. Absent. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Absent. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancock.
For.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash, absent. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longden. Councillor Panday. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
For.
Councillor Wilson. That's carried.
Okay, that's carried. Right, okay then. Moving on with business. Can I ask Councillor Wilson, first signatory to the requisition, to move the second motion?
Thank you. Writing that in her sleep tonight. Mr Mayor, the two town centres of Nuneaton and Bedworth are the focal point in the lifeblood of our borough. Many residents and businesses often express their concern about the current state of our towns and desperately want to see action taken to help rejuvenate these cornerstones of our communities. Whilst tonight's motion will focus mainly on Nuneaton, because the main impetus for a business improvement district is coming from Nuneaton at the moment, everything that is said tonight should equally apply to Bedworth. Indeed, many of the things that could be done should Nuneaton successfully implement a bid could help teach us something about how we help Bedworth too. And should Bedworth want to form a bid, they would very much have our support. At the last election, a central plank of our manifesto was on regenerating our town centres. A key part of that was our support for a business improvement district for Nuneaton. This was a vision that over 51% of local residents in Nuneaton and Bedworth supported, and tonight's motion is designed to make into a reality the ambition and aspiration that those residents voted for. Town centres are constantly evolving and they need to be able to react to the challenges and times that they face. At the moment, a large element of the control of our town centres rests in the hands of this council. However, as we all know, the wheels of local government can be very slow to turn. Business cannot wait for that. In our view, the sooner we put the power and influence into the hands of those that matter, local businesses, the better for the state and vitality of our local town centres. Nuneaton businesses are already leading from the front and saying that they want to form a business improvement district, and the most recent ballot of the key stakeholders revealed an overwhelming support and desire to push forward with this. So far, this council has done the minimum required to enable this process. This council needs to do far more than the minimum. It needs to proactively pursue a bid together with local businesses. That is why supporting this motion tonight would send a powerful signal that we stand foursquare behind businesses and business owners in wanting to make a difference for our town centres. We should shout loud and proud that we will support a bid and send the strongest possible signal that we will use our vote when the time comes to put the power into the hands of those who know best and the most invested in the success of our town centres, local businesses. Our local MP, Marcus Jones, has long been championing the cause of a bid alongside the Conservative opposition at the Town Hall. Government funding has been secured for £48,000 worth of support towards forming a business improvement district. Tonight we need to do our bit for business in Nuneaton and ultimately Bedworth and support this motion. Just look over the border at Hinckley at what a business improvement district can do for our town. I know that a certain member of the Cabinet would like us to move to Hinckley if we like it so much. I say, why should I and the residents I represent have to move to Hinckley? We should have it here in Nuneaton. And we can have it here in Nuneaton if we have the vision, ambition and aspiration that our residents want and voted for overwhelmingly in May. Vote for this motion to support a business improvement district and support the local businesses in our borough. I move the motion as it stands, Mr Mayor.
From the list of signatories.
I have my right to speak. Thank you.
I've now got a list of speakers to speak. First one being Councillor Jackson.
Put before us and say it is fake news that we have done the minimum on this side of the chamber. To state that it was Labour in control who part-funded a feasibility study looking into a bid. We have discussed this exact subject numerous times in this chamber and elsewhere. It is Labour who has stated publicly that it would do exactly the same for Bedworth businesses if they are so interested. And so, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment that I think it takes us to the place we already are, Mr Mayor, and takes us out of the world of politics and into the world of plain common sense. The motion, Mr Mayor, deletes a few words and adds a few words and reads as such, and I have copies, Mr Mayor, for yourself, the leader of the opposition and indeed the member of the Green Party, and a couple spare for members of the public. The amendment... Mr Mayor, I'm more than happy to let Councillor Guttridge have a copy. The amendment reads, the continued viability and vitality of our town centres is critically important to the economic success of our town centres. This council welcomes the proposals by the local business community to pursue a business improvement district for Nuneaton Town Centre. Should businesses in Bedworth Town Centre decide to look at a business improvement district, we will support with some funding towards a feasibility study, as we did for Nuneaton. The council will always act in the best interests of both town centres. Mr Mayor, it's like apple pie and custard. You can't vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Do you have a seconder for that?
As Councillor Jackson hands out the amendments, Mr Mayor, it seems very clear to me that the two major parties within this chamber, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, and I'm sure Councillor Condacor as well, as a minority party when there, all agree that we need to move forward with the bid in Nuneaton when it comes forward, obviously, and we also need to support any bid that comes forward financially with a similar type amount that we did in Nuneaton to enable them to move forward if they wish. I cannot see, we've tried to make in the amendment the actual proposal a lot more friendlier, so both sides can accept it. Now I hope that the Conservatives will join with us and allow us to move to the vote, and let's see where the hands count. As simple as that, Mr Mayor. Why waste time when both major parties agree wholeheartedly that Nuneaton should have a bid and we should support that bid? So I move second the amendment and move to the vote, Mr Mayor.
I do have a few more speakers. Councillor Elliott. Right, okay, so it's open to debate on the amendment. And I've got some speakers already lined up. So, Councillor Elliott.
I'm fundamentally in favour of bids, which were, of course, introduced in England by Labour government in 2004, although I do feel we should proceed with due caution, as they are, after all, a symptom of the Tory ideology of what have been termed budget airline councils, who only supply the bare minimum services, leaving individuals to plug the gaps out of their own pockets. This can in some cases be disastrous for small struggling businesses who have to pay a levy on top of all their other expenses, but as long as they're properly managed, accountable, democratic and agreed by all, I'm happy to stand behind my colleagues who've already funded the feasibility study and agree that we just go to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Concord, did you want to speak on this amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Right, thank you. I too have been a great supporter of the bid, and both the motions contain fairly similar words, albeit with a few less instructions in the Labour version. Business improvement districts can be very good, or they can be quite oppressive depending on how well they run and who sets them up. It is important that the small businesses are at the heart of it, and I hope and I think this case is the case for the Nuneaton bid. The bid can actually help the council if the two are working together, and there's lots of things we should be asking a bid to do. We hear on the radio about how markets are struggling. One thing that's really seems to come out is things like electric payment systems on market stalls. That's exactly the sort of thing a bid could start to organise. When we've got limited officer time, we could actually get a bid being a positive addition to our council staff. So I've always been very supportive of the bid. The Greens, who got 11% in the election the year I stood, had the Business Improvement District on our leaflets as well, because it's a good idea to boost our local businesses, and the uniqueness of the town is important. We're not a massive city. Our small businesses are really important, and we're only just getting the shops back to the new ones. We've lost so many under the days of Harvey, and they're just just shops in town, and I really hope the bid does well. And I think we need to look wider than retail, because the big thing the bid needs to get involved in is things like getting a cinema into town and arts and culture and things, because that's what's driving footfall today. Thank you.
Evans.
In the standard debate, we're speaking to the amendment, so I do apologise, I don't want to speak.
Councillor Grant.
Doesn't seem to be too much different to that, so I don't see anything wrong with it. What is encouraging is that we're now hearing that the quote, should businesses in Bedworth Town Centre decide to look at a business improvement district, we'll support this with funding towards a feasibility study, as we did with Nuneaton. That's encouraging because it's now suggesting that we'd have... Pardon?
Point of order, Councillor Lloyd.
It's factually incorrect. It's on council record that we have supported Bedworth with financial contribution when they want to put the bid together.
Oh, well, but what's good is that we're now saying that Bedworth needs a separate business improvement district to Nuneaton, which is good because it accepts that both towns have their own unique needs, but both just as valid and important news coming from meetings that Craig Tracy has had with businesses and local councils, where they did say that they're interested in the idea of setting up a business improving district at Bedworth Town Centre, and that's what we've been hearing from discussions that myself and Councillor Izzy Seckham have been initiating with the Borough Council and businesses. So hopefully we can all work together on this, and what we can achieve in Bedworth will be just as successful and great as I'm sure what is going to happen in Nuneaton will be. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden-Walmsley.
I just think business improvement districts are a great idea. They put businesses at the heart of our town centres, the people that know how to run a business, how to be successful, and start removing some of the power from bureaucrats. You know, there's some wonderful statistics actually by the Independent House of Commons Library about the success of bids, such as representing the voices in the business in the area, increased footfall, increased staff retention, area promotion as well. And I think those are some of the things that we could really harness, both here in Nuneaton and Bedworth. I also think it's really worthwhile stating and reiterating, I think the point Councillor Wilson made earlier, that it's really good to have the government support behind the Nuneaton Business Alliance, who funded them with £48,000 towards the process for this. I'm a little disappointed, and whilst I understand the amendment to attempt to be friendly, I'm a little bit disappointed that the amendment has decided to attempt to remove the principle of asking the leader to use our vote in this council to support a bid, because as a council we have very large rateable properties when we look to then vote for an establishment of a bid. For those that don't obviously know, when you establish a bid, it's not just about you as a business each having equal say, it's actually proportioned down to the amount of business rates that each business pays or the rateable value of that property. And we have a lot of property in both the town centres, and I hope that whilst the amendment she's moved tonight withdraws that, I hope that she still takes on board the sentiment and the feeling, and perhaps the rationale behind the Conservative original motion, that actually
There's a lot the council can do to continue to support, which is to be welcomed, and one of the big things we can do is vote for its setup, vote for its initiation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Speakers, and then we're moving on. So I've got Councillor Golby next.
Again, it's basically half and half, isn't it? You've kept half of the wording in and changed half of it. So it's not to be turned down, because any step that we can get is a positive one in this aspect, because it actually takes some of the, like Councillor Walmsley said, the bureaucracy from the council and puts it into the hands of the business owners who know their businesses. They know what they want and they know how to do it. You can sit there rolling your eyes if you want. I mean, you've heard it 1,000 times before. Well, it's 1,001 for you then, isn't it? It's taken 1,000 times for you to actually pay attention. So anyway, yeah, I'm supporting this, and you're rolling your eyes at me. It's unbelievable. We want the town centre to have vitality. We want the businesses to succeed. We want to stop the exodus. We want to stop the boarded up shops. We want the footfall to increase. We've been saying it for ages and ages. We actually proposed a bid a while ago, and it was rejected in this council chamber, and then 2 weeks later it was announced as a Labour proposal in the press. Again, have it, not bothered, as long as it achieves something, stick your name on it. The small business people that I know and that speak to me, and the market traders, they are desperate for something to assist them, because the town centre is going down and it's on its knees, and we all know that, and there's all various arguments about why that is. And I am to the whole business of the business improvement district. If we look at other business improvement districts, they're doing really well. Hinckley is doing really well, and yeah, there's a lot of people that choose to go to Hinckley and don't come here. The bid puts on a lot of stuff in Hinckley. Leamington gets a lot of footfall because they've got a bid. It's really effective. Coventry bid is putting on their light switch on. They're expecting 21,000 people on one night, and that's organised by the business improvement group that they've got. We should be getting that. And talking about budget airlines, great analogy, because budget airlines make an absolute fortune. They might be budget to us, but they make an absolute fortune. So yeah, let's be a budget airline. Let's make a fortune. We're not fighting with the likes of Birmingham, who are the BA of the airline world. Let's fight with the EasyJets of the council world, and let's make some money off of it. I'm happy for that to happen, because somebody's got to do something.
Councillor, I've got Councillor Hancock's next, please.
Just confirm we're talking to the amendment. And it was interesting there, Mr Mayor, because Councillor Guttridge spoke very loudly there and said about, I forget exactly what the words were, but it ended in town. And that's one of the problems we have at this council, Mr Mayor. There are two people that are parochial to Nuneaton. Councillor Condacor, during his little statement, kept talking about the town. We are one borough, Mr Mayor, Nuneaton and Bedworth. But you seem to not want to have that.
No, listen. I'm going to take it through the Mayor. I'm going to start doing a bit more respect in here, because it's just, this is a mockery from everybody. So start taking things through the Mayor. You'll indicate, take it through me, and then we'll speak. That's the way it's going to run. Councillor Hancock, can you carry on, please?
Mr Mayor, the amendment has been moved, partly because of the wording of the original motion, and it talks about us instructing the leader of this council to do whatever. We can't do that at this stage. It's a bit like Brexit, this argument. We have things here, but we haven't got any detail. So, you know, that doesn't always work. Bids don't always work. Councillor Condacor is right. Bids do not work everywhere. Coventry has been quoted. Coventry's had massive problems with their business improvement district. Mr Mayor, I will move on to Councillor Grant. Again, try to hijack the issue that we've got in front of us. Give an example, Mr Mayor. The MP for Bedworth and North Warwickshire, photograph in the Nuneaton News, with an accompanied statement, this is outside the Bedworth Arms Houses, where they'd had a meeting with town centre businesses and Bedworth councillors. What he should have said, Mr Mayor, was Bedworth Tory councillors, because at the same time he said we should all be working together. Well, I wasn't invited to it. I'm not aware of any other Bedworth Labour councillors that were invited to it. So, it's one of those again. It's false words, Mr Mayor. Work together, they don't want to do that. A bit like the borough plan, they didn't want to do that either. I'm going to finish there, Mayor. I did have two more words. My two words were allocated already. The funding was put into the budget some time ago. If the Bedworth businesses wanted to proceed with a bid, the funding was there within the council for that.
Got Councillor Tromans, then we're going to move to the vote.
I'd certainly like to draw attention to what Councillor Golby was saying, and also Councillor Walmsley. They made some very good points about just how important bids are, what benefits that they can bring to us, and just how in need we are of getting something done. So, I mean, there was no need to change our motion to put forward this amendment. It's not radically different. You know, I'm happy to support it just because, as has been said by my colleagues, we want to get this forward. We've been wanting to get this forward for years. I stood up first. The first time I called for a bid in this council chamber was 2015. We've been pressing and pressing and pressing, and if you want to finally pick this up, you know, great. But the trouble is, we've seen it before. We've raised it in a council, and then 2 weeks later, the council puts out a press statement saying, oh, it's all our idea and we're doing it. Fine, you own it. I think in 2015 I even said, if you want to claim it was your idea, fine. Just for heaven's sake, get on with it and start improving our town centre. Well, the same thing applies now. But the trouble is, years have gone by, and you're just not... Well, in this case, it was about Nuneaton, and what we called for was for Nuneaton to be the pilot, because that was the one that was most likely to succeed as a bid. And if it worked for Nuneaton, then we could use those learnings for Bedworth. So I'm going to be completely clear about what I said back in 2015. But the months and years have gone by, and we're still at this stage where, rather than just, even if you wanted to abide by the spirit of this, rather than you just vote for our motion... Yeah, you've had to amend it so that you've got a load more wiggle room. And that worries me that we'll be here in months and years' time with you having done just a bit more and just a bit more, with us having to keep your feet to the fire the whole time. It doesn't give the people confidence or the town centre shops.
Can we sort of wrap this up so we can hand it back?
OK, you know, I'm going to support this because we want a bid to go forward. But if you try and wriggle out of it and delay any more, we will not let this go. We will keep your feet to the fire.
Yeah, Councillor Wilson, you have got a right to reply.
Councillor Jackson is right in one regard, in that there is a direction of travel amongst all of us within this chamber to see a business improvement district for both Nuneaton and for Bedworth. The amendment actually removes some of the teeth which we put into ours, and the teeth were about asking the leader of the council to exercise her vote should a vote arise, to do so, to actually send that signal to businesses that we would do so. I hear what Councillor Hancock says about tying the leader's hands. That wasn't ever in the motion. If he cares to read the original motion, it says, and instructs the leader of the council, and here's the important bit, where it is in the best interest of the council to do so, quote, to exercise the council's vote in any future referendum of local businesses, etc., etc. That safeguard was already built in. There was no need to amend the original motion. And the original motion was quite specific as well, in that Bedworth would continue and would always continue to have our support should it need to do so if it wants to go in the direction of a bid. Now, we will support the amendment from these benches because for the first time, this amendment will signal this council's policy of supporting a bid. Because I remember being stood here, with, Councillor Tromans was sat alongside me, actually, if I recall, and I moved a motion on a bid and saying that we should look at this and support it and try and kick-start it. And I've just done a quick count around the chamber, and if I remember people's terms correctly, I apologise if I haven't, but there are 12 members of the controlling group who were here at the time who all voted against that bid. Recorded vote, and you all refused it. Matter of public record. And now 3 years later, you're changing your tune because I think actually the local election results have had something to do with that. But you rejected it then, and then 2 weeks later, you went and said, oh, we'll give you some money to do the feasibility study. Now, that's all well and good, and you actually had our support in giving the money for the feasibility study. But you said one thing with one face and did another with another. And that is what sits wrong with me, that you didn't have the guts to actually stand up and do so. And it is only now that you're having the guts to go on public record with a motion, a statement of policy of this council, voted on by every single member of this council to say, we are in support of a bid. So it doesn't go as far as we would like, but it moves you one step closer to actually being more in line with the thinking of this group and of the residents and the businesses out there in supporting a bid. So I will support it. But you need to remember that the most recent ballot of all the businesses were in favour of it, and it would be a very, very disastrous move if any leader of this council went against the wishes and feelings and experience of businesses. And that's why I think they're wrong in removing that clause. But I hope that she will when the matter comes, or even if I'm in the chair. Mr Mayor, you never know, could happen. I, for certain, will give that guarantee that I would vote in support of it if it's in the best interest of the borough, and I hope she will too, because that's what businesses need. They need our support, and they need to have our confidence moving forward. And so, step in the right direction, but not as far as it should have been.
Right then, so now we're going to move to the vote on the amendment. Simone? Sorry? Okay. Yeah. Do we want to just do a show of hands on this? Okay, show of hands then, please. Right, that now becomes a substantive motion. So, we can, move straight to the vote. So, is all those in... Right, got to do the vote again. Right, okay then. That's carried. So now...
Sorry, point of order, Mr Mayor. Score, was there anyone who abstained or dissented?
Would you like me to do the vote again? Unanimous.
Just asking what the officers
unanimous.
Recorded. Thank you, Mr.
Right, we can carry on with business. Can I ask Councillor Wilson, first signatory, to the requisition to move the third motion?
Is on perhaps the most topical issue facing the borough at the moment, certainly over the past couple of months. The prolonged series of illegal traveller incursions on council land across our towns. This council has a consistent track record of failing to deter and prevent these encampments being established. I'm not saying anything about evictions. Within Nuneaton and Bedworth, and the motion tonight seeks to correct the series of policy blunders by the Labour administration over many years. As long ago as 2015, I challenged this council to look at seeking injunction powers. Press release there. I said, and I quote, following the months of travellers using the open spaces of Nuneaton and Bedworth as if the borough was just a giant caravan park, the Conservatives have called on the political leadership at the Borough Council to stop whinging and start acting over the problems we face. The response from then Council Leader Dennis Harvey was no. In 2016, a special OSP meeting was convened to look at ways we could improve our reactions to illegal traveller sites. One of the recommendations was to look at all the existing legal powers available to the council to protect council land. This included injunctions, both borough-wide and site-specific. Cabinet remained silent. When this council introduced a public space protection order to replace the alcohol restriction order, Councillor Troman spoke before Cabinet and asked them to use the same legislation to protect our play and open spaces from traveller incursions. Cabinet did nothing. I think we can begin to see a pattern emerging. Only now, following the local elections and Labour were soundly defeated at the ballot box, have they shifted position slightly and indicated that they may apply for an injunction. Residents across Nuneaton and Bedworth, particularly those in the areas most affected, are saying that this is too little too late. Yet again, it is only the Conservatives who are putting forward robust, specific and sensible measures to defend the interests of tax-paying, law-abiding citizens of Nuneaton and Bedworth. This motion sets out in clear terms action that needs to be taken immediately to finally begin the process of doing the right thing by our residents. However, recently we have seen nothing short of a farce with this council's latest attempt at dealing with travellers. Instead of maintaining their collective backbone and refusing the travellers' most recent attempts at setting up a site in our borough, they quite literally handed over the keys of the Gala Field site to the travellers. They established a legal encampment on land that should be reserved for the use and enjoyment of the people of our borough. So we went from playing cat and mouse with the same family across Nuneaton to signing an agreement with them to let them stay for 28 days. That agreement wasn't worth the paper it was written on. You didn't need to be Mystic Meg to work out how that was going to end. I have tried obtaining answers from officers about what exactly went on, so far to no avail. The leader of the council has some serious and difficult questions to answer. At what point did the travellers contact this authority to set out their demands to stay? What threats, although I think we've heard partially from Councillor Longdon, were made by the travellers if we didn't accede to their demands? At what point was she consulted about the emerging situation? At what point, if any, did she authorise the signing of the agreement with the travellers to let them stay on the Gala Fields? And at what point was it evident that the agreement was breached, and when did she authorise its termination? The hard-working taxpayers of this borough deserve answers to these questions, and the leader of the council needs to be held accountable for her decisions. But they also deserve a robust response to dealing with these incursions and providing meaningful outcomes. The only way this council can try and reclaim some credibility and start the process of showing we won't just roll over is to vote for this motion tonight. No get-out clauses, no amendments, do the right thing and vote these recommendations through in their entirety. Otherwise, you don't deserve to hold the positions of power and trust that you now do, and you should step aside and make way for those of us who are prepared to make the tough decisions. I move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder for that?
Mr. Mayor, I'll speak now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've just heard from Councillor Wilson tonight about the length and the action we've been calling for a long time. And we'll contrast this to perhaps what we've seen in the party opposite, particularly in recent weeks. You know, we had Councillor Jackson channeling her inner Chamberlain, waving around some worthless piece of paper, allowing travellers to stop on public land for up to 28 days. How can the public have any confidence in our council when, metaphorically and according to some reports, we physically are giving the keys to travellers, to public land? Nuneaton and Bedworth is seen, and we've heard this from the horses' mouths during their encampments, that we are, as a borough, a low-hanging fruit. And what the motion before us tonight seeks to do is to close some of those options and to begin to progress forward so that we're no longer seen by the travelling community as that. Many of our sites across the borough have little or no target hardening measures at present. And our neighbouring councils, including Rugby and virtually all those in the metropolitan West Midlands, have injunctions in various forms. If we continue to lag behind, then we could become, and we will become, the easiest target in the West Midlands. Now, since May, we've heard the talk about possible action, and that's all we've heard to date. Platitudes. We may consider doing this. The possibility is that we'll do that. Mays and possibilities just aren't good enough. Residents of our borough, absolutely rightly, they demand action, and they demand it now. We've been putting forward all manner of proposals, both sane and sensible and balanced, in the hope, actually, that the party opposite will do the right thing and work with us. We have another meeting later tonight to discuss potentially reallocating £100,000 for immediate target hardening of our green spaces. Now, whilst I mention that meeting later, let me be clear at this moment, I think this should be heard in public. The arguments for both why and should it can be heard in public, I'll be making later at the appropriate time, but I think it's important to include those remarks just now. The motion before us tonight, therefore, is not really at all contentious. It calls for works to be undertaken to progress a legal injunction, crucially including persons unknown, to give us the best and broadest possible legal protections. It also calls for a working party, looking at public space protection orders, looking at a work plan for target hardening for our precious public community green spaces. We know that there are many options for target hardening. Each location across our borough will need its own measures, specific measures. It might be ditches in one area seeded with nice wildflowers to make them attractive. In another area, it might be metal fencing or railing. Concrete in place to provide large visible protections as well as physical. It may be large locks which cannot be simply cut through with bolt cutters, the size of an iPad, about 4 times as thick. There may also be entirely new suggestions that a working party can come up with that are unique to our borough and may end up being rolled out nationally. What a working party would allow us to do, therefore, is to begin setting the wheels in motion. And I implore, and I'm going to speak directly now to the members opposite, I implore you, you know these proposals are proportionate, they're sound, you absolutely know they could have a huge benefit to our communities. They could reduce quite significantly, as in other areas, the number of illegal and unauthorised traveller encampments. Join us. Join us tonight on the side standing up for local residents. Join us on the side standing up for their wishes and their concerns. Join us in standing up for the protection of our communities. Support the motion this evening.
Councillor Jackson.
Point of 3, fake news has just been given in regard to myself. I did not stand anywhere waving a piece of paper. Complete fake news. And frankly, I think the opposition should not be spreading complete fake news in this council chamber.
Councillor Jackson. I've got a few other speakers. Councillor Longden.
A couple of the things that have been raised whilst they were moving this proposition. You've been mentioning it for ages, you keep saying, and you've taken it up. You haven't. You may well have done that. You can wave your piece of paper as much as you like. You never, not one of you, have ever contacted me. No, you haven't. On this particular case, you have not contacted me, and neither did anybody contact the previous portfolio holder. Councillor Walmsley kept saying, putting forward proposals. No, you haven't. Completely and utterly wrong to even say that. You've never put one proposal forward. And when I've sent out...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I believe in the Constitution, and I can't quote you the exact bit, that if you know something is being said that could be action, I'd just like to, and this is meant in the most friendly terms, remind Councillor Longden, it's being videoed, there is no privilege in here. He's speaking in absolutes. What he's saying is not literally correct. I'd ask him to just...
The issues that you are raising, quite frankly, are wrong. It was not a legal encampment, it was tolerated. Learn the words, look at the legislation, look at what goes on. Warwick tolerated them, and they came back from Warwick quite early. Why? I don't know. Those are the issues. The preamble on page 4 of this is completely wrong, because this council has exercised all its legal opportunities to dealing with the incursions. And we have an excellent team, despite what you may say over there or think. We have an excellent team that is well respected around the county and in the Midlands, and has a reputation of dealing with these things quickly. Even the police recognise that, and even the police have commended us on that. It also mentions the words deter and prevent, which is borderline on being illegal. Just think about that, what you just said to me, Councillor Tromers, because your own words are borderline illegal. We do not have any powers to deter or prevent anybody, travellers or anybody else, from coming to this borough, and any such measures could be deemed as a breach of the Human Rights Act or the right to roam. So think hard on what you're saying in these motions. In paragraph 1, you seek a borough-wide injunction. I assume this is designed to cover Warwickshire County Council and private land as well. Warwickshire County Council were invited to join us in the injunction we are applying for, but declined. So it would appear they're happy with the procedures that are in process. The private sector are very adept at dealing with incursions on their land, and as such it would be unfair to expect the council or the council taxpayers in this borough to pay for those two organisations. Paragraph 2 seeks to obtain an injunction to cover borough land. Why? Why? You've already got an injunction for a borough-wide one if you go for that. So therefore the council land is already covered. Absolute waste of time putting that in because the injunction's there. And any court in the land, as Councillor Wilson should know, because he actually works in the courts, would laugh that out of court. If you've already got an injunction on the borough-wide plan, why do you need to do another one for specific parts of the borough? The establishment of a working party is pointless, as all the necessary actions are being taken and have been taken for weeks and months. And of course, working parties are held in private session and the Tories don't attend working parties. You have a policy on that. You do not attend working parties. You keep telling us. Just finally, Mr Mayor, the work has been in progress on target hardening for some time now, and the most successful of these are being looked at in other areas. So if we can find some successful target hardening, we already have an instance already where target hardening has been breached. That's the best way of doing that. And the work already being undertaken, so I'd like to move an amendment, Mr Mayor.
No, Councillor Longden.
He's had his time. If he wished to move an amendment, he should have done so in his time. Therefore, he cannot move an amendment.
Right, I've got other speakers. Councillor Conacher.
Thank you very much. The motion got butchered. I have been very keen to support every motion to take action on travellers who are causing a nuisance. Travellers do have the right to roam. I have the right to roam. I don't have a right to make a mess of places where I roam. And in supporting travellers' right to roam, you should never support the right for them to trash places, have children running feral, have them close businesses. We have rights and we have responsibilities. And I think far too often people accuse us slightly on the left because we want people to have rights. Well, I want people to have responsibilities as well. I'm happy to support the Tory motion. One little thing I'm never quite sure on, though, is about working parties. And so on their list of things, number 1, absolutely fine. We should be looking at what we can do. Number 2, fine. Working parties. 2 years ago we had this problem with travellers, and this council said we'll have a meeting about travellers, and the Police and Crime Commission said we'd have a summit about travellers, and we had 2 separate meetings. We will not solve the travellers' problems if we keep having separate meetings. So if we're having a working party, it should be as inclusive as possible. And although there might only be certain people who can vote on the working party, it should have people like me, hopefully, as observers, if you want to exclude me. So at least we can actually start to bang heads together. Because we have actually demonstrated to travellers why we're such an easy target. Because we keep arguing, we keep prevaricating, and we keep blaming whoever's not our party. The police have failed, council have failed, all sorts of excuses. Let's get everyone in a room, let's get this sorted, let's try and see what we can do. People are fed up of politicians. Please get together, have a working party, have a cup of tea and some cake, and please try and get to some agreements on what injunction we can have. Please try and get the Police and Crime Commissioner and the County Council and the police and try and get this solved, because this is where we were 2 years ago. I will get criticised if I support a Labour motion by the Tories, a Tory motion by Labour. Let's just start to get together. Let's just agree we need as whatever action we can take. And the thing the travellers do not like is a place that's united, a place where what they get up to is recorded. They hate being on video. They hate having people knowing what they did in a certain place. And one thing I keep suggesting is let's get more video cameras into the areas where they are breaking in and breaking through padlocks. If we have a working party, maybe we could suggest everyone's best ideas rather than everyone's most blame.
Thank you, Councillor Connacher. Councillor Jackson.
In speaking to the motion, I think I'd like to move the following amendment. This council will continue. Some things, it's all right for people opposite to criticise if members here tend to laugh, but obviously we can't say the same when it happens the other side. Mr Mayor, I believe in mutual respect across the council, and I think you would find it very hard to see evidence of me not showing mutual respect. Mr Mayor, I move this council, as an amendment, will continue to prepare and, if merited by the evidence, apply for an injunction on specific pieces of public open space and car parks, which will provide sanctions against both named individuals and person unnamed who established unauthorised encampments in these places. Contrary to comments made at a previous council meeting, we simply have to have relevant evidence in order to apply for an injunction. So it is right that we gather that evidence and then present that appropriately. 2, Mr Mayor, we continue to use the full powers of Section 77 of the Gypsy and Traveller Act. And it has been stated tonight, Mr Mayor, that the police feel we exercise our powers very impeccably, and we do. And Councillor Connacher made a comment about getting people together. I did hold a meeting with the police and county council officers to discuss this with the portfolio holder, Councillor Barry Longdon. We had an in-depth meeting, and at that meeting it was accepted by the police and the county that we are very good in using our powers. So I think it is a bit inappropriate, some of the comments made in regard to the very hard work that our staff undertake. And I would like members opposite to rethink in regard to that. Mr Mayor, I have copies of this amendment. I will circulate it now. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'll second that.
I was just going to ask if there's anybody to second that. Thank you.
Under the terms of the Constitution, an amendment or motion must be factually correct. The motion before us is not actually factually correct because the powers are actually under Section 77 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1944. Therefore, the reference in this motion is therefore factually incorrect, and the motion is therefore, or the amendment, is therefore invalid.
Mr Mayor, I'm more than happy to accept the exact wording that has just been put forward by the solicitor.
Okay, Councillor Wilson. This comes back to what we've had before, and because the word not is not there, it's not negating it. So I will accept what has been put forward. Right, so we've had this put forward. It's been seconded, so now it's open to debate. Councillor Lloyd.
And can I start by... There's been a lot of debate about, us working with other parties. I, like some of the members on the other side, were at the scrutiny committee meeting that looked at this very situation, of travellers and all the options. And at that scrutiny meeting, this council was praised upon a number of occasions by the police, by the county council, in their own words. What does surprise me, and it's not excuses, what does surprise me is when the police won't use their powers, time and time and time again, when schools have got to close, facilities have got to close, and the police won't use their powers to move them on. And why on earth the county council won't allow them to go to the transit site. As simple as that. There's two elements to this. The county council have been asked, as we heard earlier on, whether they want to be part of a borough-wide notice, and they don't want to be part of it. So that does surprise me as well, if we truly want to work in partnership. Now, we'll use every means we can under the law, to move travellers on, and we always do. And I had a bit of experience of it. I had the rough ride for about a year when I was dealing with it when I went about the time of the scrutiny committee. And one of the things I'd like to point out, we talk about hardening. Only tonight, I understand, on Vernon's Lane, they filled a ditch in and removed a fence. That was hardened. Luckily, we found out about it. Paul Dale and his crew have already been out to that area. We're talking about the overheads. They cut them, not with an hacksaw or anything like that. They use an angle grinder. They've equipped. They cut them. Why can't the police identify them? Because they're completely hooded and they disappear. And then along comes the rest of them and moves on. And the police won't take action because you can't identify within that group who has done it. We've had bottle banks, 5-ton bottle banks we've stuck in front of gates. They've moved them. They've got the equipment on their lorries, they move them. Again, the police don't take any action. Even when residents say, oh, it was that lorry over there, you're prepared to go up to court? And I understand them not wanting to. No, they feel threatened. Target hardening. Ditches, I've just said, they fill them in. We've welded gates up because we got tipped off that they were coming, so we welded the gates up. They removed the weld. They bust the weld with an angle grinder. It goes on and on and on. Target hardening, not convinced. Yes, we've got a programme, but I'm not convinced that's the way to go. As I've said previously, it's got to be a change in the law. Now, I noticed on Sunday there was a documentary, I caught just a glimpse of it, about the Irish scenario where they criminalise the access onto lands by travellers. That's the type of thing we need. That would help. But what's our MPs doing? Nothing. Oh, was he? Oh, he hasn't told us he's going for it. We've been asking for it for years. So he's now doing it. Oh, hold on a minute. You've been blaming us all night for that. And because we've been shouting and telling the MPs to do it, now he's doing something. Well, that's great. I'm not going to shun him for it. That's fantastic. I'm glad he's doing something. Right? Because that's the first time that he is doing something. And that goes for both our MPs. It goes. I know there's Bulkington as well, yes. Do you know, Mr. Mayor, I've been ever so quiet all night. I haven't said a word when they've been talking. Not a word. I've stood up on one occasion and challenged, that's all. Just shows the contempt that they've got opposite. But at the end of the day, Mr. Mayor, we've done everything within our powers, and that's what I'm saying, within our legal powers. We are recognised in the county of being the fastest authority to turn them around. In that fact, I think we did it in 3 or 4 days on one occasion, which was extremely fast. So we are trying to do the job within the powers that we've got. I look forward through this recommendation to see if we do get that.
Councillor Elliott.
Citizen travellers throughout history, but they've only become the big problem that we now see during the last few years, down to a failing Tory government who refused to fund local authorities adequately. The Budget Airline Council that Councillor Golby is so in favour of. If local authorities were funded adequately, they could provide suitable transit sites for travellers, which they would use, which local residents wouldn't object to because they were appropriately placed. They wouldn't be vandalised, which would be a proper, long-lasting solution, palatable and fair for all. But until we have a government who's prepared to fund councils, we'll keep playing cat and mouse and blaming the wrong people, but solving nothing. As Councillor Lloyd has indicated, we need the MPs to step up to the plate and sort this out once and for all. Thank you.
Councillor Croft.
Night, and I want to talk quite personally about why the motion is necessary as it's written on the order paper and why there's such strong public feeling about it. It's about the really important principle that everybody is treated the same under the law. Now, some weeks ago, Councillor Golby and I visited the Jubilee Park the morning after the traveller group had left, and what we saw was absolutely disgusting. There were piles of refuse, vandalism, antisocial behaviour, reports of antisocial behaviour, human waste deposited on a children's playground and in a family park, the backs of people's homes used as toilets. We spoke to the volunteers there, who were worried that they couldn't open the Sea Cadets building because the path to their site was so unhygienic. We spoke to the worker from Glendale, who I'd like to publicly thank and commend, who was there on his own, in the rain, on a bank holiday Saturday morning, cleaning up human filth. Days later, Councillor Golby and I, and Councillor Walmsley as well, were on the scene just after the travellers had broken into the Phoenix Park. We spoke there to the brave man who tried to stop that trespass, and for his efforts, he'd been assaulted and was holding a couple of his own teeth. This is the same group who the council have effectively invited back into the borough and done a deal to stay for 28 days. This is the behaviour they knew about when they invited them back to tolerate them. They can't blame anyone else for that. They can't blame the county, not the police, not the government. They're trying to blame the officers now, but it was their call. And finally, we've had the bitterest irony of all. We have the sight of those residents getting parking tickets, while just a few yards away, this traveller camp has been given free rein to move in. You can see why people feel that they are not being treated fairly and why the council is not on their side. You can see also why this borough is seen as a soft touch. The residents of this borough should not have to put up with this. These are people's lives. We don't seek to discriminate against any particular group or victimise any group, but we do seek to uphold law and order. That's why we need this motion and why we have to reject the amendment tonight. Now, there isn't a magic bullet, but this won't stop without a new policy of tough action using all the powers that this council has, but so far hasn't used and have been deleted from the motion by this amendment. Firstly, injunctions. Now, we were all very relieved to hear that the council will explore a High Court injunction, but let's accelerate those efforts and let's have the details. Let's put the work into look at doing it borough-wide and potentially at specific sites. Then there's great potential for public space protection orders to help the fight against incursions. So let's get that committee together and let's get the work done. And finally, we've already found the £100,000 for target hardening and protecting our open spaces. We can settle that later tonight, so let's get straight to work. If we get a tough reputation for using our legal powers, and if we fortify sites to prevent incursions, then we can discourage the trespass in the first place. After all, prevention is the best cure. Mr. Mayor, we need to do all we can to stop the events of this summer from ever happening again. We need to ensure that every resident feels that they are treated equally and that the council is on their side. To that end, I urge the council to pass this motion and reject the amendment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Councillor Golby.
I have to say thank you for this, because the residents are going to absolutely love it. They really are. They already think you're not doing enough, and now you prove the point. And going back to something that was said from the public gallery before, I'll take no lessons. I need no pointers to a BBC website. And next time I'm out picking up human filth, I'll give you a ring and you can come and help me, if that's how much you want to get involved.
Okay. And just talk through the mayor. There's no need to get onto this. And can public...
The current traveller group that are here, which is why we need to seriously reject this amendment, they were invited here. They were actually invited here. You've not been honest about that with people. We pretty much gave them the keys to the kingdom and said, come in, help yourself, put your feet up, do what you want. But sign this bit of paper and just tell us that you're going to behave yourself. Who in their right mind thought that was going to happen? Anybody that's had any contact with any sort of encampment will tell you they would have been absolutely howling with laughter the second you walked off that encampment. Means nothing. Means absolutely nothing to these people, because they will break into places. Do you think a bit of a signature on a bit of paper is going to count? And you talk about claiming back money. That was something else that was mooted impossible by the Momentum crew that are no longer here. Well, we actually asked them to pay. So again, how were you going to get the money? If it's impossible, how were you going to get the money off them? Along with the signature. Did you ask for cash up front? Did you put like 50p in the bottle bank so every time they put something in they got charged for it? Again, it's us that's picking up the tab. So, you know, let's be straight about these things. They were invited by this council, nothing to do with us, because we found out everything through the press. We actually found out more through the press than we did through our own officers and fellow councillors. So don't talk about joint working when you can't even be bothered sending us an email to tell us that you've invited travellers for 28 days. That is on you, wholly on you. You know, I accept there's a welfare issue. I've seen it myself. I've seen it with my own eyes, so yes, I can verify there's a welfare issue. However, we had no legal obligation to do anything about that welfare issue when they were invited to the borough, because they were not in the borough at the time that we actually invited them. They weren't here. We invited them in. It then becomes our welfare issue when they're here, but up until that point, it's not our welfare issue. And talk about being held to ransom and threats. Well, fine, yeah, go on then, blockade. Because you're on the national news and that does nothing for traveller relations. They don't want that. They want an easy life. But now they know that they're going to be able to just do that and get what they want. So, because you bottled it once, they'll try it again and they'll try it again, because that is actually how these people operate in that sort of community. And news travels fast. And that's the other thing that we've got to be aware of now, is you may get an injunction against people that are named. However, news travels fast, so they might not come, but there's possibly a group of other ones waiting in the wings with a map of where they can go. X marks the spot. Marcus Jones, MP, again, has already called for an Irish option. He's done that. And also, let's not forget that this council didn't take part in the government consultation that was actually to do with changing the laws on travellers. We didn't take part in it. I have been run around ragged trying to find out who we responded to and what did we say. I understand, I was asking this question at the last full council, I understand that we actually were included in a wider response. However, nobody can tell me what we input into that wider response. I have been through legal officers, I have been through department managers, I have been through senior officers, I have been through portfolio holders. Not a single person can tell me what we actually responded. I have been told, again, Councillor Longdon, I absolutely reject what you said about people not emailing. I've emailed you, I don't know how many times, I've emailed you with pictures of human waste that were to be included in, I offered them to be included as evidence as part of the injunction. And I think the last email I sent you on that was, sorry, I'm spamming you all with pictures of poop. You cannot say that you haven't been emailed, because you have, several times. I emailed people, I emailed everybody that I could email when the Traveller encampment was on Bermuda. I emailed everybody that I could email within reason to try and get other encampments sorted out. You're wrong in what you're saying, and it's the resident.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Councillor Connachar.
On the amendment, I think it's now gone far too weak. One of the things I think we need to do is actually get this council working together. Obviously, there are people with different experiences, and there's a lot of hostility between the big parties. But Councillor Wilson knows so much about the legal stuff. I'm sure Councillor Longdon knows lots about what's his. And we need to get people at a table. We're still arguing. Can we please sort this out? And when people say, well, the police have praised us, wouldn't it be good if we did something where the public praised us? We actually did something right.
Councillor Tromans.
So perhaps I'll begin where we started tonight. Yeah? What did we say? All you're going to hear is it's someone else's fault. It's the government's fault. We've done everything, but it's someone else's fault. The times I've heard Councillor Longdon and then Councillor Lloyd got up and started saying, we have used every single power that we've got available. We've done everything we can. Rubbish. Complete and utter rubbish. And let me give you the facts of why I can say that. You heard from Councillor Wilson at the start of this debate, several of the times that this has been officially raised in this council chamber, in front of Cabinet, in front of overview and scrutiny. And then Councillor Longdon says, but nobody's come to me directly. Well, we've heard that they have. But what does Councillor Longdon think he is? More important than the council? Apparently, the leader of the council isn't sufficient. The whole council isn't sufficient. Officers aren't sufficient. Everything has to go to Councillor Longdon. Yeah? Well, it's pointless going to Councillor Longdon, because the gloves are off now. I gave you fair warning this video cameras were on, and yet you continue to say things that were, how can I phrase this, incompatible with the truth. You gave an answer to the question I asked at the last council meeting on this subject that was full of things that were factually incorrect. You said nobody has raised these matters, but yet Councillor Wilson has said the times he's raised it, half the times I've raised it. I've got a list of other times I have. I wrote to the council officially in October 2016, pressing them for why they weren't taking action in response to a government consultation. Well,
But Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto getting tough on travellers, or indeed anybody who wishes to harm our communities for that matter. Knowing this, I'd say that your initial decision and instinct to stay quiet was a wise one. In principle, what we've put forward is very right. This council needs to start talking tough and acting tough. No more blank cheques and no more soft touches. No more Neville Chamberlain-style leadership and no more Dennis Harvey-style leadership. We need a new leader, and we have one ready to take over, and his name is Councillor Chris Wilson. And if we were running this council, we wouldn't be debating this tonight. We'd have already done it. Thank you.
Councillor Longden, and then I'm having the right to reply of Councillor Wilson.
Well. Isn't it a pantomime? Playing to the gallery, looking to the gallery, playing to the cameras. Wonderful. It's what you always do. It's becoming obvious what this is all about. It's nothing to do with the issues. It's all about promoting yourselves within this council with the gallery and the cameras. Councillor Croft, blame officers. I did nothing but praise officers when I spoke, and I do not blame officers for the decision taken when they came here. It was a wrong decision as far as I'm concerned, but it was done for the right reasons. Just get it right. I did not blame the officer at all. I said it was the right decision. Oh, sorry, I said the right reason. Wrong decision, right reason. He also went on about powers. We're not using our powers. You never once explained what powers we're not using. None of them. None of you did. Councillor Tromans, well, he went off on a right tirade, didn't he? As you expect. And he spent more time, in fact, saying about the answer, telling everybody about the answers that I gave at the last meeting, just because you didn't like it. Well, don't ask questions if you don't like the answers. That's all I can say to you. You also mentioned about legal measures. You not once did you say what legal measures we're not using. We are using.
He's referred directly to.
I'm not giving way. Put your hand up and come up with it afterwards.
Listen. Again, though, you've just jumped up again, haven't you?
I have asked.
This has got to stop. It's got to stop.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, can you give me directions? Am I not in my right to raise a point of personal explanation?
And I've got the right to hear it after Councillor Longden has spoke.
So he never mentioned I've actually mentioned that, and we are using all the legal powers at our disposal. Other people might not be, but we certainly are. Injunctions. Currently, our application is being examined by our barrister, and when she is satisfied that the case is prepared, she'll be going before a High Court judge. The reason going for a High Court injunction is because it carries more weight, and they have sheriffs. County court judgments, when I heard about rugby, I did some background. The county court have one bailiff covering the whole county. So they would have to come or get people in from outside. And they'd also need the cover of the police, if they can get it. Councillor Golby invited here, yes, I suppose you could put it that way. But actually what they did was they phoned up and said they were coming. We didn't send them an invitation card to come here. They said they were coming, and that was it. You're the only person, Councillor Golby, who actually mentioned this sick child, very sick child. There's no compassion over there to give any credence to that child's welfare. None whatsoever. And yet we do that as a matter not of just of law, but of conscience as well. And you haven't got any conscience from the sound of it, because you don't care about that child or what that child's doing. The MP wants the Irish option. I knew that some time ago. What is the Irish option? The Irish option would mean us providing far more transit camps all over the country, in this borough as well, to accommodate those travellers when they come. So therefore, the Irish option is really wonderful. I asked you last time at the meeting, was there any volunteers who wanted their areas examined to see if there's a transit camp? There wasn't any takers, including myself. So therefore, if the MP is going down that route, that's what he lobbied the Minister on during the government's consultation. About the injunctions as well, sorry, that injunction is with a barrister at the moment, but don't be conned into believing that it's easy to get an injunction, especially a High Court injunction, because it isn't. So we are doing that. We're doing all the... It's a waste of time, Mr.
Councillor Trollins, do you have a point of explanation?
Hadn't mentioned any other remedy 4 or 5 times public space protection orders, like it says in the motion, and like Councillor Wilson would be referring to public space protection orders. Again, we're getting to the point that it seems... Okay. Can people just say anything, even though it's clearly not true?
I've asked... You've provided that. Right, so... Now back to Councillor Wilson for a right reply.
London really shouldn't talk on subjects of which he knows nothing. He talks about bailiffs. Who's in more... I asked members of the council and also members of the public, who is more likely to know about bailiff staffing numbers, me, an employee of HMCTS, or him who knows nothing? I think I know more about my staffing figures than he does. So we've had some very fine speeches tonight, actually, Councillor Croft, and I will even go so far as to say Councillor Condorcet spoke probably the most sense I've ever heard him speak in this chamber when it comes to the motion, supporting the original motion. Councillor Longdon and other councillors over there just don't get it, and they have proved yet again why they should not be running this council. They say we don't want to work within the law. They ask us what other remedies would we use? An injunction is within the law, which you haven't used. A public space protection order is within the law, which you haven't used. How much plainer, how much clearer, how much simpler can I say it to you until it actually computes? That is within the law, and that is an option you haven't used. That's because you haven't used it yet. That's precisely the point of the motion, because you haven't done it. And unless we put on more pressure like we have consistently done, you would probably have kept on saying no, 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 we won't do it. And that's why residents are here and they're rightly annoyed that you haven't done anything. Now, you haven't exercised the public when you say the police and county support you, because I read that statement very carefully. And they said, you're very good at evicting them. Being good at evicting them isn't the same as prevention and deterrence from stopping them from coming here in the first place. You're dealing with the issue after they've arrived, never mind before they've arrived. Now, no one is claiming it is going to cure everything like that. But the more weapons we have in our arsenal to try and stop this, the better. And Councillor Longdon said that it is not illegal to deter... that it is illegal to deter or prevent. No, it isn't. What absolute rubbish and misleading the residents of this borough. We absolutely have
personal explanation,
right...
Mr. Mayor.
Well, let me just, Councillor Wilson, wrap this up now. You're coming to the end of things now.
I don't know when the beeper's going off.
Okay, carry on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It is not illegal to deter or prevent, but it is absolutely illegal to defecate on a slide. It is absolutely illegal to dump waste in the middle of a field, and it is absolutely illegal to rock up uninvited at the taxpayer's expense. And yet that is precisely what the amendment will allow, because you are not using every single power, straining every single sinew of this council to do the right thing by the residents. Now, we must use those powers. Now, if there had been 300 caravans on their way, you know what I would have said if I was sat in Councillor Jackson's seat? I'd have said, bring it on. Because actually, residents, if they could have actually seen us do something, they might have actually had some more respect for us as politicians, rather than saying they're all the same, they won't do anything. And I tell you what, Councillor Longdon, if you'd have called me up, because the councillors at the officers have got my number, and the other councillors sat around here, we'd have stood there arm in arm with you when we were trying to stop them. We would have done that as a show of unity, that we will not be cowed, we will not be defeated, and we will not be blackmailed. And what is even more concerning is that instead of answering the very important questions I raised at the start, Councillor Jackson has remained completely silent about the exact precise moment she knew about what happened. As leader, she should be telling us and explaining to residents of this council exactly what she knew, when, and what instructions she gave. Because from the sounds of it, when Councillor Longden gave his initial statement, he said it was officers who made the decision. Officers should not be making any decision about that, especially knowing how highly politically contentious this is. This should have been referred to the highest echelons of the leadership of this council, Councillor Jackson. She should have been saying whether we sign up to that agreement or not. Now, if she didn't, then something is seriously wrong. And if she did agree to sign that agreement, then she is clearly out of touch with residents on what they expect. Either way, this leadership over this issue has been completely inept, and they should not be holding their positions of power and trust and responsibility over this, because they cannot do the job.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Longden, have you got a point of explanation?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I did not. I said it was borderline illegal, and I took legal advice on that. And that's the difference. You just tend to you just hear what you want to hear, so you can actually blow it up and for the cameras. I said borderline. It's actually written down here as borderline.
Last council meeting, all the Conservative members opposite voted against us continuing to seek an injunction. It is, Mr Mayor, because they're accusing Labour of not carrying forward this action, and we have. It is Conservatives that opposed it at the very last meeting.
OK. We're going to move to the vote. So this is on... We can have a recorded vote, yeah. Simone.
So, for or against the amendment, please. So, Councillor Beaumont. For. Councillor Brindley-Edwards. Councillor Brown, absent. Councillor Croft. Yes. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazanes, absent. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox.
For.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson.
Consistently for.
Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash, absent. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longden. Councillor Pandare. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
For.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Suspension of standing orders, because we're just coming up to 3 hours to enable the business
I'm
to
just
be
hoping that
concluded.
we can just get this in just in time. So that's carried then. Right, so we're going to move to the vote on substantive motion now then.
Mr Mayor, I call a recorded vote, please.
Yep.
Okay. No. Councillor Beaumont, for or against? For. Councillor Brindley-Edwards. Councillor Brown, absent. Councillor Croft. Yes. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane, absent. Councillor Glass. For. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox.
For.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor.
Councillor Concord, you're voting?
Abstain. Councillor Welling-Nash is absent. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longden. Councillor Pandare. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
For.
And Councillor Wilson. That's carried.
Okay then, so that's carried. Right. So, thank you, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the business of this extraordinary meeting. I'm going to now call a 15-minute break before we continue. 5? Is everybody okay with 5 minutes? Okay then, 5 minutes then, and then we'll be back. Thank you.